Every Sunday morning, at exactly 9:12, my life used to pause. No matter where I was, no matter how busy the week had been, no matter how broken or hopeful I felt, that moment always arrived with the same quiet certainty. The doorbell rang, not loud, not urgent, just enough to pull me out of whatever thoughts I was drowning in. And when I opened the door, the same miracle was always waiting on the other side. A bouquet of flowers. There was never a name, never a card, never even a single word to explain why they were there. Just my address written carefully on the delivery slip and the flowers themselves, fresh, beautiful, impossible to ignore. For 11 years, those flowers followed me through every season of my life, through love, heartbreak, fear, joy, loneliness, and hope, without ever asking me for anything in return. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought it was a joke. Then I thought it was some strange coincidence that would stop as suddenly as it had started. I never imagined it would become the one constant in a world that kept falling apart and rebuilding itself around me. What I didn't know then was that those flowers were not just a mystery. They were a promise. And the truth behind that promise would one day change everything I believed about my past, my family, and myself. Looking back now, I realize my life can be divided into two parts: the years before the flowers and the years after them. Before, everything felt fragile, uncertain, like I was walking on ground that could collapse at any moment. After, even in the hardest seasons, there was always something waiting for me at the door every Sunday morning, reminding me that someone, somewhere, saw me and cared enough to stay. Those flowers arrived when I was 23 years old, freshly divorced, nearly broke, and convinced that I had already failed at the one life I was supposed to build. They arrived when I had no reason to believe in stability, no reason to trust in the future, and no idea that the most important relationship of my life was about to begin with a stranger I would never meet. For 11 years, I carried that mystery with me. I moved cities, changed jobs, fell in love, fell apart, became a mother, lost people I thought I could never live without, and found pieces of myself I didn't even know were missing. And through all of it, the flowers never stopped. This is the story of those 11 years. It is the story of a promise made long before I ever understood it, and of a love that protected me from the shadows of my own life without ever asking for recognition. The first bouquet arrived on a Sunday morning that already felt heavier than it should have. I had moved into that small apartment on Cedar Street less than a week earlier, dragging 2 suitcases, a box of old photographs, and a heart that was still bruised from the divorce I didn't know how to talk about yet. The apartment was quiet in the kind of way that makes your thoughts echo, and that morning I had woken up with the strange sense that something in my life had already ended, even though I couldn't explain what. I wasn't expecting anyone. My family lived 3 states away. My friends were scattered across lives that no longer included me, and the only person who used to knock on my door had already closed that chapter of my life for good. So when the doorbell rang, I almost ignored it. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, staring at the sink, wondering if maybe the sound had come from another apartment, or from the street below, or from my own imagination. But the doorbell rang again, soft and patient, as if whoever was on the other side understood that I wasn't ready yet. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. No person, no footsteps, just a bouquet of flowers resting on the welcome mat like it had always belonged there. White lilies, soft pink roses, and small purple flowers I didn't recognize, wrapped carefully in pale paper and tied with a thin ribbon. I picked them up and looked down the hallway, half expecting someone to come running back for them. Nothing. The building was silent. I checked the label for a name, a card, any explanation at all. There was only my address, written in neat handwriting, and no other information. For a moment, I felt foolish standing there, holding something so beautiful with no idea who had sent it or why. I brought the flowers inside and placed them on the kitchen table in the only vase I owned, an old glass jar that once held spaghetti sauce. As I filled it with water, I kept glancing at the door, waiting for someone to knock again, waiting for the mystery to resolve itself. It didn't. The apartment, which had felt empty and cold moments earlier, suddenly seemed different, warmer, almost alive. That afternoon, I called my sister and asked if she had sent them. She laughed and said she barely remembered my new address. I texted the few friends who still knew how to find me. None of them had any idea what I was talking about. By evening, I convinced myself it had been a mistake, that maybe the delivery company had mixed up the address and someone else would come looking for them soon. No one ever did. That night, I sat at the small kitchen table, the flowers between me and the silence, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Comfort. Not the loud kind, not the kind that demands attention, but the quiet kind that settles into your chest and tells you that maybe the world is not as empty as it feels. I went to bed that night believing it was a one-time thing, a strange accident, a moment that would disappear as quickly as it had arrived. I didn't know that I had just stepped into the first chapter of a story that would follow me for more than a decade of my life. I didn't know that someone somewhere had already decided I was worth watching over. And I had no idea that the flowers would return the following Sunday, at exactly 9:12 in the morning. The second bouquet arrived the following Sunday, at the same time, 9:12 in the morning. I was already awake, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the thin line of sunlight creeping across the wall, when the doorbell rang. This time I didn't hesitate. I opened the door almost immediately, half expecting to see someone walking away at the end of the hallway, but once again, there was no one. Only the flowers, waiting for me, as if they had been placed there by the building itself. They were different from the first bouquet. Bright yellow daisies, deep red roses, and soft white blossoms I couldn't name. I remember thinking how carefully chosen they seemed, as if whoever sent them had spent real time deciding what would be inside that bundle of color. I carried them inside and placed them beside the first bouquet, which was already beginning to fade, and for the first time, the question formed clearly in my mind: this is not an accident. During the week that followed, I caught myself thinking about those flowers far more than I should have. At work, while filing papers and answering phones, my mind wandered back to that quiet hallway, to the way the bouquet had been waiting for me, to the strange feeling that someone out there was paying attention to my life in a way no one else was. It was unsettling, but it was also, in some confusing way, comforting. The third Sunday came and went exactly as the others had. Same doorbell, same silence, same careful arrangement of flowers. By the fourth, I found myself waking before the alarm, sitting on the couch with my coffee, watching the clock until the minute hand reached 12. When the sound finally came, I felt a strange flutter in my chest, like relief mixed with anticipation. I told myself I would start asking questions. I spoke to the landlord again. I asked the neighbors if they had seen anyone. I even called the flower shop down the street, though I didn't know why, since the delivery slip never listed a company. No one knew anything. The mystery deepened, but the flowers never stopped. Weeks passed, then months. Somewhere along the way, the bouquets stopped feeling strange and started feeling necessary. They sat on my kitchen table while I ate alone, on the windowsill while I folded laundry, beside my bed while I tried to sleep. They became witnesses to my life, quiet and constant, never asking anything from me, never leaving. One night, after a long shift and an argument with my sister over the phone, I found myself standing in front of them, touching the petals, whispering, "Who are you?" The room didn't answer, of course, but I noticed something then that stayed with me for years. The next Sunday, the flowers were soft and pale, almost fragile, as if they somehow understood the shape of my heart that week. That was the moment I stopped believing in coincidence. Whatever this was, it had chosen me, and I had no idea what that would mean for the rest of my life. Time has a strange way of moving when you are being watched by something you cannot see. At first, I counted the Sundays. The 5th, the 10th, the 20th. I marked them quietly in my mind, half expecting that the flowers would eventually stop, that the pattern would break, that the story would end as mysteriously as it had begun. But the weeks kept stacking on top of each other, And the doorbell kept ringing at the same minute every Sunday morning, as steady as a heartbeat. By the end of the first year, I could no longer remember what my Sundays had been like before the flowers. They shaped my weeks without my permission. I stopped making plans for that time in the morning. If I was out late Saturday night, I still woke early. If I slept at a friend's place, I rushed home. Missing the delivery felt wrong, like turning my back on something important, even though I had no idea why. I started arranging the bouquets carefully around the apartment. Some dried on the windowsill, others stood fresh in vases on every surface. The place slowly transformed from a temporary shelter into something that felt alive, warm, watched over. Friends commented on it when they visited, laughing, teasing me about my secret admirer. I laughed with them, but I never joined in the joke, because whoever was doing this knew me better than anyone else in my life. They knew when I was lonely. The flowers came bright and full. They knew when I was breaking. The colors softened. They knew when I was hopeful. The room filled with light. Some Sundays, I spoke to the empty hallway before bringing the bouquet inside. Other times, I waited with the door open, listening for footsteps that never came. I told myself 1,000 stories about who the stranger might be, and every single one of them felt wrong. As the second year passed into the third, the mystery stopped feeling like something outside my life and became part of who I was. I carried it with me to work, to dinner, into my dreams. And without realizing it, I stopped asking when it would end. I started wondering if it ever should. I met Daniel on a Tuesday afternoon in a bookstore I couldn't afford to shop in. I was sitting on the floor, pretending to read a novel I had no intention of buying, when he asked me if I was blocking the aisle on purpose, or if I was planning to live there. His voice was calm, a little amused, and when I looked up, I saw tired eyes that somehow felt familiar. We talked for almost an hour without noticing the time, and by the end of the conversation, my life had already shifted in a way I wouldn't understand until much later. Daniel became my world faster than I expected. We filled the quiet spaces in each other's lives with laughter, with late dinners and shared plans, and the dangerous kind of hope that only comes when you believe the future is finally opening instead of closing. For a while, I forgot about the flowers, or at least I didn't think about them as much, because my heart had found something else to hold on to. He learned about them on our third Sunday together. The doorbell rang while he was in the kitchen, and when he opened the door and saw the bouquet, he turned to me with a confused smile. I explained the story the best I could, which wasn't very well at all. He laughed at first, teased me about having a secret admirer, but I saw something shift behind his eyes. Something quiet and uncertain. After that, he noticed them more than I did. He joked about them, but sometimes I caught him watching the flowers the way you watch something you don't fully trust. They didn't stop when he moved in. They didn't stop when he proposed. They didn't stop when we stood in a small borrowed church and promised each other forever. Every Sunday, no matter what our life looked like that week, the doorbell still rang at 9:12. And for the first time, I began to wonder if love and mystery were meant to exist in the same life. Marriage did not break all at once. It faded. It faded in the long evenings when Daniel stayed late at work and I ate dinner alone. It faded in the conversations that turned into lists of tasks, in the touch that became something we remembered instead of something we felt. We were still kind to each other, still polite, but the space between us grew heavy with everything we were no longer saying. And every Sunday, the flowers arrived. Some weeks they were bold and full of color, filling the apartment with brightness I could no longer find in our conversations. Other weeks they were soft and pale, almost fragile, as if they somehow understood the quiet cracking of our life together. I sometimes wondered if the stranger could see what was happening to me before I admitted it to myself. The night Daniel finally said the words, the apartment was silent in a way that felt permanent. "I don't think I belong here anymore," he said, sitting across from me at the table where the flowers stood. I nodded, because the truth had been living in my chest for months. We did not fight. We did not blame. We simply let go. The following Sunday, I almost did not open the door. When I finally did, the bouquet waiting for me was different from all the others. White flowers, simple and calm, tied with a thin silver ribbon. I stood in the doorway holding them, and something in me broke open. How do you always know? I whispered to the empty hallway. Divorce has a way of shrinking your world without asking permission. Friends choose sides. Rooms feel too big. Silence becomes a presence that follows you everywhere. I moved again. A smaller apartment, cheaper, farther from the life I had imagined building. I didn't tell anyone my new address. I didn't post it. I didn't send it. I wanted, for the first time in years, to disappear a little. The following Sunday, the doorbell rang. The flowers were there. That was the first moment real fear entered the story. Not the soft mystery kind. The kind that makes your hands go cold and your chest tighten. Someone knew where I was. Someone had followed my life closely enough to move with me, without ever showing their face. For the first time in years, I wished the flowers would stop. I started checking the street before opening the door. I asked the landlord. I asked the neighbors. I called flower shops and delivery services. No one knew anything. There was no trail to follow, no answer to hold on to. And still, every Sunday, the flowers came. They came through job changes, through therapy, through the nights I slept on the floor because the bed felt too empty. They came when I thought I was finally strong and when I realized I wasn't. The stranger was the only thing that did not leave. After the fear came something quieter. Not understanding. Not answers. Acceptance. I stopped trying to catch the delivery. I stopped calling flower shops. I stopped standing in the hallway searching for footsteps. The mystery did not disappear, but the weight of carrying it alone became lighter once I stopped fighting it. The flowers became part of my identity. Friends joked that I lived inside a romance novel. My sister told me I should write a book about it one day. I laughed with them, but inside I knew this was something different. Something heavier. Something real. Some Sundays, I sat on the kitchen floor with a bouquet in my lap and talked to the stranger as if they were sitting across from me. "I'm doing better," I said once. Another time I whispered, "I'm not okay this week." I did not know if anyone was listening, but the following Sunday, the flowers answered. I was 32 when the doctor told me I might never have children. The room was too bright, too clean, too calm for news that heavy. I sat there nodding as if I understood what he was saying, while my mind drifted somewhere far away to a future I had quietly been building without realizing how fragile it was. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my sister. Not my friends. Not even my therapist. That Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. The bouquet was smaller than usual, soft yellows and pale greens, arranged with a gentleness that made my chest ache. I carried it to the kitchen, set it on the table, and sat down on the floor in front of it. For a long time, I just looked at those flowers and cried. "Why now?" I whispered. 2 years later, I was holding my daughter in my arms. The flowers were there when I came home from the hospital. They were there on her first birthday. They were there the morning I realized my life was no longer only my own. Sometimes, when I rocked her to sleep, I wondered if the stranger knew her too. Motherhood is loud. It fills your days with motion and your nights with questions. There is always something to do, someone to feed, someone to soothe, someone who needs you more than you need yourself. For a while, I forgot about the mystery that had followed me for years. Not because the answer didn't matter, but because life finally felt too full to carry that question at the front of my mind. My daughter grew. I grew with her. The flowers stayed. They watched me stumble through single motherhood, through exhaustion that lived in my bones, through nights I cried in the shower because it was the only place no one could hear me. They were there when I celebrated the smallest victories and when I felt like I was failing at everything at once. Sometimes I wondered if the stranger could see me the way the flowers did. And sometimes I felt something else. Gratitude. For someone in the world who cared without conditions. The 10th year was the hardest. My mother became ill. My job became unstable. And my daughter started asking questions I was not ready to answer. That year, one Sunday passed without flowers. For the first time in a decade, the doorbell did not ring. I stood by the door at 9:12, staring at the handle, my heart beating too fast, waiting for a sound that never came. The silence felt wrong, like the world had skipped a breath. The week that followed was heavy. I could not stop thinking about it, about what it meant, about whether the stranger had finally let go. The following Sunday, they came again. Late. Almost noon. A single white rose. I do not know how I understood it, but something inside me shifted. The stranger was human. On the 11th year, the flowers arrived with something they had never carried before. A card. Just my name on the front, written in the same careful handwriting I had seen on the delivery slips for over a decade. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside, there were only 4 words. "It's time you know." No signature. No explanation. That night, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I let it ring twice before answering, already knowing that whatever waited on the other end of that call would change the shape of everything that came after. I stared at the phone for a long moment before answering. My heart was loud in my ears, and I had the strange sensation that I was standing on the edge of something I could never step back from. "Hello," I said. There was silence. Then a man's voice, old and tired, but steady, like someone who had been carrying the same words for a very long time. "Are you the one who used to live on Cedar Street?" I hadn't lived there in years. "Yes," I said carefully. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "I'm calling about the flowers." The world tilted. "I need to see you," he said. "There are things you deserve to know. Things I promised I would never tell, but I don't have much time left." We met on a Tuesday afternoon in a small park by the river. The sky was pale, the kind of color that feels unfinished, and the air smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet. He was already sitting on a bench when I got there, his hands folded in his lap, his coat too heavy for the weather, as if he were afraid of becoming cold in more ways than one. He stood when he saw me, slowly, carefully, like every movement had to be measured. "My name is Thomas," he said. I sat beside him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The river moved in front of us, steady and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. Finally, he said the words that emptied my lungs. "Your mother asked me to watch over you." Thomas told me about the year my mother's life collapsed. How she had lost almost everything she had built. How she was afraid she would not survive it. How he had been the one who found her sitting on the steps of the courthouse, staring at nothing, with no idea where to go next. They had known each other for years. Not as lovers, not as family, but in that broken space where 2 people recognize each other's pain and choose not to walk away. When she learned she was sick, long before she ever told me, she called him. "If anything happens to me," she said, "promise me you will watch over my daughter. Don't let her feel alone in this world." He promised. He never told me who he was. He never wanted me to know. He just kept the promise. Thomas told me things about my mother that I had never known. How she worried about me constantly after the divorce. How she kept a box of my childhood drawings under her bed. How she was afraid I would disappear into the world and no one would notice. When she died, she left him a list. My first apartment. My second. My third. My job changes. My married name. My daughter's birth. She had prepared him to follow my life without ever entering it. "She loved you enough," Thomas said, "to stay invisible." 3 weeks after we met in the park, Thomas died. That Sunday morning, at exactly 9:12, the doorbell rang. The bouquet was on the step, and beneath it a letter in my mother's handwriting. The last thing she ever wrote for me. The letter was short. Not because she had little to say, but because she knew I would feel everything between the lines. She told me she was proud of me. She told me she had always known I would survive. She told me that some love is meant to protect from a distance because being close would only make it weaker. At the bottom, in the same soft handwriting I remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists, she wrote, "You were never alone." That night, I placed every bouquet I had ever dried and saved across my table. 11 years of flowers. 11 years of love that asked for nothing. 11 years of someone standing between me and the world when I did not even know I needed protection. For the first time, I did not feel watched. I felt held. The mystery was never about the stranger. It was about my mother. My daughter was sitting on the floor coloring when I told her everything. The flowers, the promise, the years. She listened carefully, quiet in a way children sometimes get when they are holding something important. Then she looked up at me and said something that made my chest ache. "So Grandma sent me flowers too." I nodded. She smiled. The flowers stopped. For the first time in 11 years, the doorbell did not ring. And strangely, I did not feel empty. Because now I knew. I planted the seeds from every bouquet I could salvage. Behind the house, where the sun stayed longest. Spring came, and for the first time, the flowers grew by themselves. Every Sunday morning, I still wake up at 9:12. Not because the doorbell rings anymore, but because my heart remembers. I walk into the garden, sit between the flowers that grew from 11 years of love, and breathe in the quiet. Some stories don't end. They simply change shape. And now, every Sunday, I send flowers too. If this story touched you, in any way, if at any point you saw yourself in it, or if it reminded you of someone you love. So, I invite you to be a part of this channel. Here we tell stories that carry real feelings, profound silences, and truths that we often only understand too late. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. Because sometimes, a single story is all a person needs to not feel alone.